So this goes live on all of them?
All of them. And we're live right now. Tanya just...
Okay.
We are officially live. We just boom in the building. So we didn't, yeah, Tanya gave us a countdown, but we weren't ready. We're still talking to each other. So hi everybody, it's Carol Fife, council member for Oakland's District 3, and we're here on another Thursday. I preempted our regularly scheduled conversation that we were going to have about redevelopment to talk about intersectionality, to talk about all of the things that have been happening to our family members across the country who just happen to be AAPI folks. And I brought two women. I really thought it was important to hold up and lift up women right now, specifically in light of what happened in Atlanta, to talk about what's going on and how we support and care for each other, amongst whatever else everybody wants to talk about. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our guests tonight and let them tell you a little bit about themselves as well. We have Jennifer Lee, and I don't know if you want to say anything right now. And we also have Karina Liete, and please pronounce your last name because I don't think I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Karina Liu.
Liu.
L-I-E-U.
L-I-E-U. Karina Liu, Jennifer Lee, thank you for being with us tonight. And we're going to go ahead and start with Jennifer. I've known you for a few years. The first few times I saw you, I thought you were like quiet because you were in all these coalition meetings, just like really focused and paying attention to the subject matter. And then I saw you on fire at a city council meeting. And I was like, is that the same person? I should have known because of the amazing, fabulous hair. But I was like, man, like she's spitting fire right now. So you made an impact on me, the way that you spoke truth to power at many city council meetings. And I'm grateful you're here today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Great. Thank you for having me here, Carol. I'm so excited that you're our council member. I literally stayed in D3 long enough to vote for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
But yeah, so I live in Oakland. I used to work for the City Workers Union, which is how I got involved with local Oakland politics. And recently, with all the stuff going on in Chinatown, I actually moved to Chinatown. It's been pretty overwhelming, and I also work across the bay in City Hall, in San Francisco, right? And comparing San Francisco and Oakland, oh my God, it's so different. I remember there was one Oakland City Council meeting where people just threw pink slips to say that Libby Schaaf was fired. And in San Francisco City Council, they don't even let you clap. I was like, that would not. They're like, please use spirit fingers. I was like, oh my God, Oakland City Council is so different from San Francisco City Council.
Wow.
So I have such a special place in my heart for Oakland. But yeah, I guess a little bit about the recent stuff. I've been part of a bunch of different patrol groups, which I guess a lot of people are focusing on right now. I'm part of the Toyson Association one and the Blue Vest group, which are a little more conservative. But I also patrol with Asians with Attitudes, which is a lot of formerly incarcerated South Asian men. So different types of folks.
Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for being there when we threw all those pink slips all over the Karina Liu, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and why this topic is important to you?
Yeah. So first off, Councilmember Fife, I really appreciate you for holding this space and just lifting up the intersectionality that's very present right now. In particular, I've just been a fan of your work from afar since Moms for Housing and what you did with Councilmember Nikki Bass to reframe the narrative around the city's budget and policing. So I appreciate you, and I'm really honored to share this space with both of you. My story is just that I am born and raised in Oakland. My parents are refugees from Vietnam. My father had a hair salon in Chinatown for 30 years. I grew up part of my childhood in Oakland, Chinatown. My introduction into, organizing and mass mobilization, really started when I was kind of young. When Nike had sweatshops in Vietnam and was torturing workers and paying them low wages, my community boycotted Nike. And that was kind of like my first awakening. And then when I went to high school, I got involved with a youth organization at Skyline High School that was all about multiracial coalitions and fighting back on violence and addressing the root causes of violence. And so, at a pretty young age, I was really exposed to that coalition building work across communities and around unity work. And, this whole conversation around intersectionality is not anything new. It's legacies of it. My t-shirt, I have Grace on here, Grace Lee Boggs. Down here, there's Yuri Kochiyama. These two women are my sheroes of the coalitions that they built. And, I know we're just carrying the baton of what they passed on to us. So for me personally, the work started for me in high school. There were very common. There were fights that broke out in school that escalated between Black folks and Asian folks. And through the organization I was organizing with, shout out to Youth Together, we did restorative justice circles with both groups. And that for me really resonated because after we did those restorative justice circles, we had conversations about what was really going on. The fights stopped. And we were able to restore a certain level of community. OUSD, we still struggle with a lot because we don't have ethnic studies. We don't have, there's certain investments we don't have yet in place. So the work that I've been committed to since I was in high school has been around social justice, racial justice, building coalitions, building community, and really just addressing how we all share a common enemy or a common, common threat. And therefore we need to kind of get together, and address the root causes of violence, of white supremacy, of white terror, and all of that stuff.
Listen, somebody in the chat, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. It says Ronnie. Is that Tone? Is that Tone? Is that Tone and his family?
That's Tony and Randy right there. What's up, Randy?
Oh, Randy says, speak. That's my brother, Tone. I want to say my son because he's younger than me, and I've been knowing Tone for like ever. He saw my youngest born was around when my oldest, who's out and doing all the videos right now, was a little boy. So Tone, that's family. And he's saying that's right, Karina.
Yes.
Tony and Randy, and it is. So can you speak, either one of you, Jennifer or whoever wants to take up this question? Why are we, and that means to the people who are listening too, why are we seeing this increased antagonism between Black folks and Asians? Is that real? Is there real antagonism there? Do we really hate each other? Or is it some gray shaded area? Are we just frustrated because of COVID? Or is something else going on? Are we feeling in Oakland like this tension between AAPI folks and Black folks? Is that real? Either one, Karina, Jen.
I mean,
you gonna take that,
I would say everything is like in the middle, right? Because it's never one or the other. Some of it is just crimes of opportunity, right? Some of it might be maybe people really do hate us. But I will say at least from my patrols, even though I think it's very problematic to have that, but we need to be in those spaces too, right? To talk to our community. And some of it is mental health issues too. When I've seen people there was when I was patrolling with the Blue Vest group, there was a Black gentleman who was just rattling the door of a business, right? And it looked like he wanted to tear it off. So then we had to run over, and one of the kids like blew the air horn, and just to be like, hey, go go go, and so I had to be like, sorry, sir, you can't do that here. So most times they just try to get them outside the skirts of Chinatown so they're not scaring people. But after that, there was somebody in the car who was like, oh, that guy's name is, and said his name. They're like, his mom passed and he doesn't, so he's like constantly, he's not off, he doesn't have his meds, and he just has this issue. So I explained it to them, and they're like, oh, okay. They're like, we get it if you have like a lot of sorrow and anger, but you can't do that. So it's like, but the group, that group is very pro police, but it did not call the cops. Right. And I think oftentimes there's hearsay because there's not as much dialogue between all the different groups. So they understand what mental health issues are. They're like, well, he wasn't being violent just because, of whatever. It's because he had mental health issues. He's not getting the help that he wants. So calling the police isn't going to help that. So most of the time they don't really, I would say they only call the police when there's like theft, which even then it's like, oh, okay. But when they know it's somebody having like a mental health thing, then they're just like, okay, the most you can do is just try to not, because they can't address it, but they know that's not, it's because his mind isn't where it's at. But I will say, even in all the different spaces, there's progressive spaces, moderate spaces, more conservative spaces. Each one of them that I tried to occupy, the Asian groups do try to work with the Black groups, which I was very interested in. So it's like the moderate Asians will find the moderate Black folks to have a unity. So it's like all of them understand, even if it's at their core is like whether or not there's a framework of solidarity, they know even strategically that your own community coming to go get you is more effective than somebody else trying to talk to you, so strategically, like the Toisan Association, I was very surprised. They had 2 Black recruits who don't speak Chinese and are patrolling with them. So I think it's very interesting to me. So that's why I'm saying like everything's complicated, everything is case by case basis.
Karina?
Well, to your question about whether or not this is real, I mean, I don't think it's real. I think that it's systemic. And I think that because if you look back at the civil rights movement, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. came out against the Vietnam War. He was one of the first people to come out in the Black community against the war at the risk of being ostracized by his own community. And he saw that there was a third world liberation front. There was a need for people of the world to unite against colonialism, right? And what happened, at least for my community, and I can speak to that, is that, we were pushed out of our country, right? Because of American imperialism. We had to come over here, and we landed on a soil that was already contested. And the United States government purposefully, because it was strategic, accepted refugees from Vietnam and Southeast Asia because of communism, because it's like, oh, we're going to take your refugees, the ones that don't want to live in communism. It was a political move. And by taking folks into the United States, they gave them assistance. And at the same time, there were Black folks, in the late 70s and 80s that were struggling from years of disinvestment, suffering from COINTELPRO, crack epidemic, all that. And then seeing these other folks who just got to the country with no money get resources. And so immediately what that does is it pits people against each other, and it makes it seem like there is such a thing as oppression Olympics, or there is such a thing as, this group is better than that group. And all of that is not real. All of that
can I just tell you, you are preaching right now? I don't know what was in the snacks at YT or if it was from your family, but thank you. I'm sorry I interrupted you. Please continue. I just want to say you are speaking to my soul right now.
I appreciate that. I think to your point, to the question that you're asking, we really do have to step back and read between the lines, right? If how the government and just U.S. imperialism as a whole has treated communities of color, poor people, and in a way sort of systemically set all of this up so that we can look around and be like, okay, well, you know, let's blame it on them. Let's blame it on them. But really, this scarcity mentality that we live with, you know, this mentality that there isn't enough for everyone, that we need to we need to fend for ourselves. That is a very colonial way of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Come on with it. Come on with it. Someone and Satya, I'm not sure if it's Satya or Sasha Fraser North, is saying the distinction absolutely matters. I won't get into the whole conversation, but I had the same conversation with my Uber driver and subsequently his wife, both Chinese. We were all in agreement that they're getting clumped together, and that's not only dangerous, but takes the onus off the systemic piece of it where it lies completely. And I think I think what the participant is saying is that you're correct. You're correct that we need to make a distinction about what is happening right now. Mm-hmm. And I just want to raise that I'm getting trolled a lot by folks on Twitter. Hella appreciate the colonial context, says Lucas Brecky Meisner. Right on. I do too. I do too, Luke. I put a tweet out on Twitter about this whole thing, and I asked people to just share their experiences with ways that the U.S. government has undermined movements. And you spoke about, Karina, you spoke about COINTELPRO and the crack epidemic. And those are just two that were utilized in the Black community in the United States to destroy the Black Power movement and the Civil Rights movement, as well as what was happening in the 80s and 90s, which was a rebirth of consciousness in the Black community. And crack, what does Tupac say? Crack came and it was strange how it rocked us, because it undermined the upward mobility that was happening after a recession that occurred in the 70s for the Black middle class. And so when I tweeted it, I didn't realize that people would just like go ham and be like, oh, well, let me tell you about what happened in Argentina. Let me tell you what happened in South America. Oh, did you know about this in Vietnam? And they were just all of these different ways that colonial, imperial, capitalist governments have undermined social movements, not just in the United States, but abroad and throughout the world. Malcolm was mentioned, Chairman Fred Hampton Sr. was mentioned. And so all of that made me think, like, what would we recognize that if it were happening today? Would we be able to call it out and recognize if that same undermining and disruption of movements happened in 2021? Because we have the benefit of history and looking back and saying, oh, look how the FBI collaborated with the Chicago Police Department to assassinate Chairman Fred and sent in Panthers, undercover agents disguised as Black Panther Party members to set people on fire and say, look at how violent the Panther Party is, right? To kill people as agents of the FBI and say, look at the Black Panther Party, right? So how did they stop engaging in that activity in the 60s? Or would it continue today to destabilize things like the defund movement?
Right.
Would we recognize it if it were in our own backyard? And could this be that? Could this be our modern day disruption of movements? And I'm just asking the question. I'm not saying what it is or what it's not. I'm just throwing it out there. I have Robin Walker who's saying Willie Lynch syndrome, keep people divided and fighting each other, and it keeps white supremacy in place. Exactly, Robin. That's exactly right. Because if we're fighting each other, then we're not focused on what the root causes are. What is our core enemy? The same thing that's a global, that's the real pandemic, the real global pandemic, which is white supremacy. So people don't like it when I talk like that. But I want to ask the both of you, how is this showing up in your everyday lives? I'm not talking about the politics although I personally believe everything is political, but how are you maintaining and telling your people, your comrades, your friends, your family about maintaining in this era where it seems like it's just back to back violence and back to back antagonism? What are you doing to stay okay?
I could take this first. Jen went first last time. You know, I think for me, it's about creating spaces that are safe, that are brave, that are built around healing, restorative principles, and, you know, moving with integrity. You know, I think one of the things about integrity is when you move with integrity, you can see you can detect when things are not right. And I feel that one of the perhaps downfalls is sometimes in our society, we're taught to kind of look for the hero, or we're taught to look for that one leader. And you know, the fault of that is if that leader falls, right, then the rest of us kind of can be like, oh, well, what happened? We don't know what to do, right? And I think it's important to invest in leaders everywhere. And so that actually starts with us in investing in us and modeling, right, how we move through movement work, how we move through community space. And so for me, what's sustaining is like how I interact with other people, right? How do I build space with folks that is safe? And so for me, especially where that sits is actually how I started organizing. I was a youth organizer. So for me, like, I rock with youth because youth keep it 100 all the time, right? And the young people will tell you if they know if you're lying, right? And so I have to be real. And so like that relationship is very very sacred for me. And then on top of that, I have to be better when I'm in front of young people. You know, like I have to be on time. You know what I mean? Because I'm trying to teach you to be on time. I have to listen because I have to teach you how to listen.
Right.
And then on top of that, building inclusive community. So one of the things that I'm also like really trying to build out is like young leaders who are trying to lead. What are your values? Like, what do you value and what do you carry? What are your principles, right? And, you know, exploring that. So I think when we move away from that, we move to the celebrity culture of what is like a leader and stuff like that. It gets lost in the sauce. You know, we forget why we were even doing it in the first place. And then we can actually have that conversation of stepping back and looking at what's up. So when you say, you know, how do we identify when something's off in our society? You know, in your heart, nobody can take that away from you, you know? And I think that's really essential. And I do think that there is something to be said about being able to step back and assess the situation. And there's power in that. And so to your point, Councilman, it's, you know, is that happening today? You know, again, don't get swept up, step back and, you know, ground yourselves. And there's practices for that, you know what I mean? Ancient ancestral practices that we all can kind of tap into that can help us decolonize our bodies and our minds and our breath so that we can actually feel and be real about, you know, how we're engaging with what's around us.
Ashe. Thank you for reminding us to ground ourselves in our ancestral knowledge. We are some of the oldest people on the planet. Just Asian cultures and Black cultures. I mean, Black folks gave birth to humanity, right? And Asian cultures are some of the most ancient cultures that we have. White folks are the youngest. They're the babies of the planet, but they're still siblings that we need to teach how to be humane. Imperialism, colonialism has been just the babies of the planet acting up, and they need to get spankings, and they need to be put back in their place. And we need the white folks who know better to go get their people and get them in check, because the original human being, the first people of the world in every continent are rising up. Our voices are working together to call for a new reality. And that is what's beautiful to me about our young people Karina, you just spoke a little bit, and I'm going to ask you to come back later to talk about the organizing you do currently with youth. But just the actions that they did yesterday at a school board member's house, the solidarity between Black and Asian young people just warmed my heart. And it was further evidence of the pushback of the narrative that we hate each other, that we're not working together. We've got to address the systemic harm, the systemic violence that causes people to not be on meds, to not even have access to meds, to not have access to housing, to not have access to food, and all of the things that it takes to make people safe. Those are the things, those are the pandemic issues that we need to rectify. And I want to make it really clear, and then I'm gonna call you back in, Jen, is that the violence that we see being perpetrated right now against elders of other races, in terms of Black folks, the violence that we keep getting, that keeps getting revisited upon us through the mainstream media, it's the same violence that we're experiencing in our own neighborhoods. So we're not condoning it when it happens to Asian folks. But what I hear coming up a lot for Black folks is, why does no one care when we're experiencing that very same violence in our neighborhoods? Why is there no press conference? Why is there no media? Our elders are also under attack. There are shootings, there's violence that's happening in our communities, and it's just accepted as normal. So I think that's part of the tension that I'm hearing from Black folks. But for me personally, I don't want to make this about myself, because the folks that I rock with, Asian, brown folks, my white allies and accomplices, all the folks I rock with stand with me wherever I am, right? So they always throw down. So it's never like, I don't have to trip about that. But there are people who don't have those relationships. Yeah. And I'm like, why do we have to be alone in this fight? And that's one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation, especially with two sisters that I know throw down intersectionally, is that no, we're not alone. None of us are alone, and we are going to look out for each other. So I wanted to say that. And I see Mush is on the line. Mush is saying it also takes each of us to have very risky conversations with our own family members, many of the older generations who've deeply bought into anti-Blackness and white exceptionalism. Facts, Mush. Facts. I need to bring Mush on the line too. I need to just get off and have all three of y'all on just talk. So Jen, if you could just weigh in on some of the organizing that you do, and why you think intersectionality is important in this particular time, and some of the narratives you're seeing, and how we actually do that pushback, like Mush was just talking about.
So you guys covered a lot, and I guess it's good for me to start from where I come from. I'm from New York, right? Chinatown, New York. And when I came here, I was floored by how much civic engagement this Asian community has here. Like in New York, we don't have this same type of voice. I saw Hotel Oakland, which is all old Chinese people or Asian people. I was like, what? Who was able to pull that off? Who pulled that off to get our poor Asian folks into a historical space? Like
who did it?
I don't know, but the community did. Clearly, I know it wasn't like a white mayor who decided to just give it to us. I'm sure it was probably, I'm not gonna name names, but I do have a T-shirt that says all my homies hate Libby Shaft. Let me just show it to you.
She's going to get her T-shirt
today. I just didn't do. I have this, but I know Libby Shaft didn't give it to us. But anyway, I was gonna say, I feel like in New York, Chinatown, we're just so hell-bent on survival. We don't have the space to heal. We don't have the space to have these kind of conversations. And I know where all of these conservative people, Asian people, are coming from, because these are my parents. I tried to have the conversation with them about Michael Brown, about Peter Liang. And I was just like, what, Officer Peter Liang, I was like, why are you supporting him? And it's like talking to my dad about it. Yeah, I have those hard conversations, but we can't talk about these big terms, because even if we translate it directly into our languages, this is like a higher level of understanding. We have to break it down a little bit. for them to understand. So it's like you have to show like the human side of things. So when it comes to a safe space, which is, you know, really funny, maybe it's also my family, we don't share emotions like that. So even the past like 2 months or a week and a half after those Asian women were killed, it's like I just kept holding my emotions in and not letting myself grieve or really feel it, because it's like you're afraid that if you let one chink crack, like, you know, if there's a crack in your armor, a chink in your armor, then everything will just spill out. And it's like, that's how our parents are, right? We don't say I love you to each other because you just feel it and you're afraid that all of the pain and all the emotion and all the suffering will just spill out. So you just try to keep it all in. So there's not, you know, when I came here, I was like, oh my God, there's healing spaces here. And I think part of it is because it is often very much led by Asian women here, right? We don't always get the space and time. So I really appreciate Councilmember, you know, Fife giving us this space, but oftentimes it's like Asian men, like, you know, they take up the space, even though we're the ones who do the work. They like the big ideas. And it's like, I don't know if I have a safe space, because I keep thinking strategically, what spaces do I have to occupy? Where can I embed myself, right? Because I know a lot of our progressive folks might not be talking to these super conservative people, but we have to keep tabs on what our community is doing. And that's still my community. I deeply disagree with their policies, but it's still my community, so I can't hate them, you know? So it's very hard for me to feel safe enough to have any emotions. So I wasn't able to go to the vigil on Tuesday, but just seeing the video of the woman screaming and doing the drumming circle, you know, it's like, it just brought up so many things that I was trying to push aside. So yesterday I was finally able to just go to the, you know, the space and just like let it out and cry. So it's like, depending on where you are, like some of us don't, you know, we're not as well versed in that. And I recognize that my community is definitely not well versed in all of this, like the way we talk about white nationalism and stuff like that. Sometimes they are really good at it, because my parents, like my dad said, you know what they call cops in Hong Kong? They just call them certified gangsters. You know, they're just certified mobsters, state sanctioned mobsters. But I remember there was an incident where in Chinatown back in the day in New York, the cops had beat up an older Chinese guy, like in the Chinatown precinct, for playing music. And I was going to go, you know, have a rally or whatever. And I put it on Facebook, and like 1,000 people said they were going to attend. And I was too young. So a cop messaged me and was like, you don't know all the sides of the story. Please cancel and delete this event. And like, it scared me because I've never talked to a cop before. So I was like, oh my God, I don't know. So then I deleted it. Also because my dad made a big display to call his friend, who he said he knows is a cop within there, to be like, please disregard my daughter. Like, she doesn't know what she's doing. She's really young. Like, I'm really sorry. Like, he really scared me. Right. So it's, for us, it's very like, you can't speak out. Like, my dad has done that before, where there was a cop who was beating up a Fujianese Chinese guy, and he didn't understand what the cop was saying. So my dad was like, hey, stop doing that. You can tell him to not do whatever, but you can't just beat him up. And my dad's a small business owner. So that cop was like, is this your store? And my dad was like, yeah, why? And he was like, okay. And then every day for a year, he wrote a ticket for my dad. He economically punished him, right? Like, I think he had to pay like a shit ton of money in fines. So from that, my dad learned, like, in America, like, as just the same as in our home countries, like, you can't speak out because you will be punished. And that guy, he was like, he went to a lawyer. He was like, I want to sue the NYPD. This is bullshit. And the lawyer was like, you know what? Because I like you, I'm going to tell you this. You can't do it. I'm sorry. Like, you can try. I'll take your money, but you're just going to be wasting your money. You can't take on the NYPD. And so, like, that's the type of lessons that my dad has learned, right? So it's like, why would you speak up? And also, we have to acknowledge that, you know, they lived in poor places where it was historically Black neighborhoods, and my dad has been beat up. So it's like, that is their trauma too, you know, like, so we can acknowledge it, but we have to do step by step, instead of talking about these bigger things, is to show them, like, look, there's Black people who are there in solidarity with us. So that's why it's important to have Black folks, like, to have 1 or 2 Black folks in the Toy-Thon Association, because they're being seen as our leaders. To see them with Black folks, it's like, those little steps are where we need to be at, you know, like, they don't understand or they might understand it, but like Chinese people are very practical. I don't know about like, I can say for my community, we're very practical in terms of steps. They say that a lot of this defund stuff, they're like, it sounds great, but that's going to take 10 years. Who's going to take care of me tomorrow? That's why they have all these patrols, right? And I know I ideologically might not align all the way, but I know where they're coming from. So I don't know if that answers all the things, but it's like.
That was moving. I want to just take a minute just because I really felt what you were saying. And Deborah Grabel says, love you, Jen. Karina, what are your thoughts around what Jen was sharing in terms of not being able to feel, not being able to emote? Has that been your experience? Because I can say I have so many stories of grandparents and great grandparents who had the same energy. Like, you can't cry, you can't be weak, you can't be all of those things. Is that something that's familiar to you?
Yeah, of course. I think even, for me, the decision around even coming here today and being on this is like, I'm usually a supporter. I'm usually a background person. I'm usually like, you go. And, part of my decision around coming to be part of this is just like, wondering if perhaps I have been so conditioned to keep silent. I know that when I first saw the headline actually on somebody's Facebook post, I was like numb. I had actually no reaction.
Yep.
I think that was a flag for me. It was like, okay, step out of it, snap out of it, say something, speak, stop being silent. And I think some of that is, conditioning as a woman, conditioning as an Asian woman, conditioned around, just like invisibility, like not being seen and then sort of being complicit with not being seen. I know that for me, one of the ways that I felt like I wanted to rise up to this moment in a different way was just to kind of take up space and move a little bit differently and acknowledge that fact that I feel invisible in silence, and I want to not do that. And I also want to and I also feel that the story and perspective that I can share around just the work of unity building is really crucial as well, because when I say step back, I think a lot of people are going to focus on this moment and say, we need to band as an API community, and I think we do. And at the same time, I think we also need to step back and ask ourselves, like, what caused this? Like when there's a lot of systems in America and in white imperialism that is very violent, and it reproduces itself in the colonized mind of the individual. And so when people behave violently, that's a reflection and a symptom of the bigger picture, the context that we live within. And so we still need to like look around, step back, and point our fingers or assess the situation and be like, okay, well, what's really happening?
Right. That is a definition of what we mean when we say that all violence is state violence. Because if we lived in a healing, healthy state, then you would see reproduced, healed, and healthy people. But when we have to compete for everything, and it's whoever has the most or is the most aggressive or is the most selfish, that's who gets the big fish. It just makes our society toxic, and that's what we're experiencing on so many levels. And that's outside of the separationists and the supremacists who really believe that whiteness is the most pure and the strongest and the smartest, and we need to reproduce the world in a white image. Some folks we're not going to be able to heal. And then there's some folks that are going to be predators in our communities that look like us. and we have to have the skills and the tools to address that too. But the goal, my goal, is to address predators wherever they are, because we all have them in our communities, and we need to create the systems to heal, but also have accountability. And I want to recognize Tracy Creer, who's saying, thank you, ladies, for your story. I also say thank you, ladies, for your story. Tita Bladen, and I understand the city clerks now when they're trying to read people's names when they're calling in for public comment. I don't know if I'm saying this correctly.
Bless the city clerks, by the way.
We love our clerks. Tita said, yes, we cannot be silent, as it implies complicity. Absolutely. And I think that's something that women hold. And I saw a comment up, Tanya, by Mush. Mush said this in her poem, is like, Jen and Karina, your voices are powerful. I'm so grateful for you. I second that. So powerful. That women in general, but this stereotype around Asian women specifically, have been stereotyped as quiet, as docile, as not speaking up. I think that is part of the fetishization that so many people. Okay, what is it? Fuck your fetish, Asian fetish. We are people.
Asian women everywhere.
Asian women everywhere. Right. Can you all speak to that a little bit? What is that? Where does it come from? And how are folks pushing back on that stereotype?
I mean, we can go historic with that, right? They banned Asian women from coming, when they had the Chinese Exclusion Act and all that stuff. They only allowed Asian men to come so that they could use our labor. No Asian women, because they didn't want us to reproduce. And so they said Asian women were very sexually deviant, all of that stuff. So you paint that picture. And then on top of that, you have all the media and the sex slaves that they had during the war, right? Whether it's the Japanese government, forcing Korean women into sexual slavery, or even the Vietnam War, where they would go to our spaces and, do what they do. So it's like this whole thing about Asian women and sexuality, it goes back like decades, like not centuries, it goes back a very long time. But yeah, I don't know, if most people will say I'm not like, you can call me a lot of things, but usually quiet is not one of them. But it is a thing that affects the way other people treat us, right? And what they expect out of us. And even if you're taking up equal amount of space, they're like, oh, she's really loud, or whatever it is. So, it is rooted in systemic racism, imperialism, whatever narrative fits, whatever. We have the narrative now of like Black people are dangerous. Back then, during slavery times, the narrative was that Black people are docile, right, gentle, polite, because that's the narrative that fits. Like, oh, they make great slaves, right? Because you don't want a dangerous slave. But all of a sudden, after emancipation, they're like, oh, they're dangerous, and Jim Crow. So it's like whatever narrative fits you. You had yellow peril, where these people coming in trying to steal your jobs. We're women with sexual diseases or whatever it is. But then all of a sudden it's like, oh, we want to make sure we have the model minority shit is like 1970s. So we're going to use Asians to pit it against Black people. But then all of a sudden now it's back to like yellow peril, right? So it's like, it flip-flops between whatever narrative fits whatever it is that the people in power, like, are the white folks, whatever narrative fits them, right? And also
I second that a million times. I think that's absolutely correct, because the same stereotypes that were used to, demonize Black people are the same exact stereotypes that have been used to demonize every racial group in this country. Sexual deviants, dangerous, murderers, will rape your wife. So for men and women, there's all of these stereotypes, but there was a time when Black folks were the model minority, right?
Yeah, people don't know that.
And exactly. So we need to remember that it's whatever tool, whatever narrative that it is usable by white supremacy at that time, at this time in order to control. And one of the ways that they use to control us is being divided, which is why I'm so once again grateful that you all came here to talk about intersectionality and the power of unity, the power of togetherness. It's an honor. Karina, I see you thinking. What do you want to share about that particular narrative and stereotype?
Oh, no, I think Jen covered it. It just made me think like you got to know your history.
Yes,
People have to
exactly.
know their history. We need ethnic studies.
Yes,
It's like
no.
we gotta like go back. We gotta like take away the Eurocentrism of these narratives and just study, go learn, get knowledge. Meet other people, have conversations. This is how we learn.
Mhm.
Talking to you just now, Council Member Five, I'm learning. Talking to you, Jen, I'm learning. And so like this is what we need. We need dialogue. We need a desire to just improve the situation. Because there's a lot of stuff going on out there that's kind of pull us away from that, and so we
Right.
have to like consciously do the opposite.
So, Karina, can you tell us how you do that with young people? Because I think they're so important and critical to this conversation. Like, what is the power of youth today, and what are some of the things that you know of that young people are organizing?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for asking that. Wow. People say that young people are always at the front of movements, and the front of change. And I do believe that because young people are not afraid.
Mhm.
And there's a moral compass that young people bring into a situation too. Like when adults get older, it's like they get more stuck in their ways, or they get more attached to whatever situation they're in, what position they have. And young people almost just kind of like crack right through it, and they're just like, so I'm going to hold you accountable, and I think this needs to happen. Have you done it yet?
Mhm.
So that's the work with young people. So a lot of it is investing in them. A lot of that is just like harnessing their leadership skills. It's building up their confidence, providing them the skills, giving them those opportunities to step up in front and see their power, helping them to kind of thought partner, just listening to them and just like repeating back to them, yeah, I heard that, yeah, I heard that, okay, so now let's do something with it, put it on paper, let's
Mhm.
make a resolution, let's go set up a meeting with some adults, and let's have a meeting and make your requests. And as an adult who's learned how to walk through the processes, my allyship is around teaching how this is how the process works. Let's decolonize it. Okay, we all are part of this. Let's bring young people into this and
Mhm.
challenge adultism, essentially. So there's a lot of work going on. I couldn't even do justice to naming all of them, but for sure, this past fall, there was the youth-led effort to get the right to vote for school board elections, which was
Mhm.
huge. I think um,
Huge.
there are a few other cities in the country that have passed a similar legislation, but none has the demographic of Oakland.
Mhm.
The whole movement was led by low income Black, brown youth. And I think that's also really key. I think one thing I haven't mentioned here is like, the class analysis as well.
Right.
Low
Mhm.
income folks are often marginalized, and the women who were
Mhm.
killed in Atlanta, right, were immigrant, low income workers. And those stories can get so easily, those people can be so easily ignored and marginalized. And I think the importance of standing in solidarity as well with the women who were killed is around like that class analysis, as well as like our female monolingual immigrant workers can be marginalized so much as well, and suffering, and then you know treated badly, and not getting protections, labor protections, not getting services that they need. Anyway, back to the point is I think also opening up space for with young people to have complex conversations about these intersections is important. As I said, there's no ethnic study, so there really aren't spaces that are sanctioned, I think, that really encourage people to have these types of conversations and really be critical about systemic issues. And so as adult allies, I think it's our responsibility to make space for that, to show them, you know, this is what we got. This is our responsibility, you know, and so we always gotta reach back, right, and help the next generation. So that's the youth work that I'm working on, and that's how I feel like I build capacity for young people.
Dope. So you're gonna allow me to make some space for some young people to come back and talk to us?
Yes, please. Can we please have some youth? Yeah, I'm gonna ask you if we can.
Yes, I would love it. I would love it. I know I have one in my house that's very active.
Yeah.
You know, she gets all her friends to be active as well. And you know, before I was in politics, I was a teacher. So I love organizing. Yeah, I can tell. I love organizing young people and talking with young people, because there is something special. They haven't had their dreams and goals and fire extinguished yet by just living life. And even when they've been through all kinds of stuff, all kinds of drama, because a lot of our young people have stories and they have like, you know, all kinds of trauma that they've experienced. They still show up and they still are ready to create something new. So I love organizing with young people, and yes, I will make the space. They can come take the space. I'll get out of the shot and just give it to them to talk and invent and do whatever. So yes, I'm looking forward to that. We're gonna wrap it up. Tanya, I don't know if there's any other questions going on, but
can I address Levanti?
I'm not sure who that is, but if you
let's not act like Asians aren't racist. All right. So Asians are not a monolith, right? Even within the Chinese community, that is one Asian out of the, I don't even know how many races there are when you say Asian, but there are a lot of different types of Asians, right? But even within the Chinese community, there's a lot of different folks. So there's folks like me, there's folks like my parents, there's folks like Mr. Ma, who's in the Toy Son Association. He's 75 years old, chain smoking man who, when the news asked him about Black on Asian crime, okay, the 75-year-old who we usually stereotype as, you know, anti-Black, he said, well, just because one Black person does it does not mean that entire Black community is like that. So I would say the whole Asians are racist. Yes, we do have some parts of our community which are discriminatory, right? But that's not everybody. And there were Asians who stood with Black Lives Matter. And honestly, my entire understanding of racial discourse, the first person that clicked to mind for me was when I read Malcolm X's book. Everything else, I didn't understand the stuff about like unity and blah, blah, blah. Like he's the first one who spoke to me in a way that made me feel like he heard oppression. Like he spoke truth to power. So let's just not do a monolith of like, all Asians are racist. Yes, that is a problem. Yes, we're trying to work on it, and it is freaking sucks, okay? I hate talking to my parents about it, but we have to do it.
I think it also goes back to what Mush had, you know, just talked about, was like, we do need to address anti-Blackness in our own communities. And the like white superiority complex that, you know, we also internalize. Yes. So I think that's work for everyone. I think one of the things that I'm coming to in terms of restorative work is like everybody causes harm, and like we all have to like acknowledge how we cause harm. And you know, like addressing that takes vulnerability, and like making change requires vulnerability. You know, it's can't perpetuate the system, you know, oversimplifying folks, like blaming folks. That's the problem. And, you know, I really hope that through conversations like this, we do get to make progress. I hope anybody who's hearing, who's on the fence, you know, who's feeling like, oh, I don't know, I don't trust people, you know, I don't trust y'all. You know, I'm not here to change your mind, but I am here to listen, and I'm here to hold space. And that's all we could really do is like be available to each other. And so, it's
and also, you don't even have a profile picture. Who are you even?
Jen is spicy. Jen.
You don't even have a face coming at us.
Oh my goodness. Oh God. You're not supposed to feed. Come on, Jen. AAA says, and a desire to want to learn about each other. I totally agree. Appreciate y'all. And Miss Ayanna Davis, I love you, sis. Thank you. I don't know what camera tricks are going on, but I appreciate the compliments on my skin. And yes, we will have that date. And yes, cheekbones coming through. I get it from my mama. But yes, we have, and shout out to Karina. That was flawless. I appreciate that commentary about being vulnerable and just not necessarily trying to convince anybody of anything, but just showing up in grace is so critical. And I appreciate that response. Mush, I see you. I love you. We're going to get you on here too. We do this every other Thursday, 6:30 p.m. We talk about the things that are going on in our communities, how to be in solidarity, how to build power for marginalized folks, how to dismantle systems of oppression wherever they are. And that I think it's important that we are all students and teachers to each other. And we all have something to give and we all have something to learn. Thank you for this conversation. Thank you for showing up. Please share it. We don't want to take up all your time on this Thursday evening. Luke, deep appreciation to you both for connecting the past to the present and moments to the systems. Ashe, absolutely. We're going to keep on doing that, showing up in this way, challenging systems. But I'm going to leave the last few comments to you all. Once again, thank you. This was last minute. Like I said, I was going to come and talk about redevelopment today and affordable housing, but this was really on my heart. I really wanted people to understand some of the energy behind the Asian folks that I know throw down and who understand Black and Asian unity and solidarity, and just for people to hear your stories and how intersectionality is so critical, especially when the media is trying to paint other pictures and create and promote other narratives, that our voices are critical. And I want to uplift the voices of Asian women, and especially the ones who got the politics. So I'm going to leave the last few words to you all. Karina, if you will, and then Jen, and then we'll close out.
Yeah, I appreciate the space that's being made here. I think one of the reasons why I decided to join today is because of there's this challenge called Slapping Asian, and that really broke my heart. And I saw that was happening in Oakland and in LA. And so, if this platform, if this conversation does anything for folks, it's just like, I hope that you get what you need. You don't you step back from whatever rage and anxiety you're feeling and get the support you need, so that you just don't perpetuate the violence that's been happening to all of us. We're all we're with you, and so let's heal. Let's do all we can to heal. And I guess I want to just say we're here for you. I'm here for you. And so if there's anything that we all can do as a community, please reach out to me. I don't know if I can share my information with you, Carol Fife, but I'm happy to share that if your folks want to reach out and connect.
So you heard it here. Y'all reach out to me, info@Carol Fife. I'm not going to put your information out in the public because we do have trolls and we do not feed them. But thank you for sharing. That healing energy is so important right now. So thank you, Karina, and thank you for being here. Jen.
Let's just acknowledge the amazingness of Carol Fife and how she came to defend Nikki when a white woman came for our Asian American council member. Like, Carol showed up 200% because Nikki is such a kind, wonderful soul, and Carol has to fuck around and find out energy, and we needed that. We needed that. Thank you so much. She is like, thank you so much for showing out and giving us this platform. Like, you were truly wonderful, and just like showing Black and Asian solidarity, like for real. And I just want to appreciate you so much for highlighting, you know, any of us, you know. You just thank you so much. And if you're a troll, you can find me at jenly123. I don't care. I will come for you if you come for me. I know I should be more gracious. I can learn from the both of you guys. You are so wonderful and kind.
And thank you, Tony. Appreciate y'all. Love the unity. Thank you for your brilliance. I agree. And, you know, shout out to all of us. I love this city. The town is real. I love our energy. And, you know, no matter what folks say, what the media is trying to perpetuate out there, we're going to take care of us. We're going to keep working in solidarity. We're going to keep doing what our community needs to heal and to dismantle oppression and oppressive systems. That's what we're about, because we got to create a new world for our babies, and they are leading us right now too. So, you know, we're going to keep doing what we do. Thank you all for showing up tonight. Even the folks that are showing up to be haters, that means folks are paying attention. So that means we're doing something right. Karina, I appreciate you sincerely. You showed fire for Liz Sook and showed up. That's why I was like, oh, I need to holler at this sister. She got character and integrity. And, you know, Jen, I've always loved you from the moment I realized you were spicy. So, and I'm seeing that show up tonight too. I appreciate everybody who came to tune in. Once again, we're here every other Thursday, and we're going to keep showing up for our community. And if you want to come on and talk to me and talk about something that you care about, just let me know. Drop me an email at info@carolfife.org. That's 2 R's and 2 L's. And we'll be back at you in another week. All right, everybody. Good night.
Bye.
Bye.